Hi, my name is Dora, and they told us that we have 10 minutes on 3 issues. And mine will be a study on our social issues that we have for our disabilities. So let's get started. Let's start here. This class, I'll show you the book. This class was first offered to me last year, but I didn't think that I needed it. Before I begin, though, I wanted to introduce you. The author of this book is Bishop Peggy A. Johnson. And this book, she states the intent of this book is to build awareness in the church regarding issues around disability. To call the church to provide full accessibility to services and opportunities, and to promote advocacy for justice for people with disabilities. First, awareness. Unless you have first-hand experience with people with disabilities, say a family member or a friend, disability to you may be from knowing the familiar sign for disability, which is the wheelchair and the blue background, to the access that dark buses have for those with mobility challenges. All of us are susceptible to disabilities, either temporarily or permanently impaired at some point in life, either by a disease such as strokes and heart attacks. The book references that people with typical bodies can be thought of as temporarily able-bodied because disabilities can happen at any time to anyone. Therefore, disability should be important to everyone. Yet, few churches have an intentional ministry or outreach with persons with disabilities. And there are a variety of disabilities: vision loss, hard of hearing, and late deafened, mobility challenges, cognitive, intellectual, developmental disabilities, such as autism, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, Alzheimer's, to name a few. Mental health, family issues and long-term support, veterans with disabilities. Oftentimes, veterans have invisible wounds, such as PTSD and soul wounds inside that need prayer and attention. A special word on deafness, the deaf culture. It's seen as a culture, not a disability. It's a way of life. The culturally deaf define themselves by what they are instead of what they are not. They consider what they are as a positive trait because it is tightly connected to their culture. So our church has begun a deaf ministry in the past year or so, and is a part of worship in a way that the hearing and the non-hearing can be one with God. And it can just only grow. Awareness is the first step to action. Second, accessibility. Let me begin with this topic with the United Methodist social principles. It makes clear that United Methodists support inclusion. And just stick with me here as I go over the social principles. We recognize and affirm the full humanity and personhood of all individuals with mental, physical, developmental, neurological, and psychological conditions or disabilities as full members of the family of God. We also affirm their rightful place in both the church and society. We affirm the responsibility of the church and society to be in ministry with children, youth, adults with mental, physical, developmental, and or psychological and neurological conditions or disabilities whose particular needs in the area of mobility, communication, intellectual comprehension, or personal relationships might make more challenging their participation or that of their families in the life of the church and the community. We urge the church and society to recognize and receive the gifts of persons with disabilities, to enable them to be full participants in the community of faith. We call the church and society to be sensitive to and advocate for programs of rehabilitation and employment. We call on the church and society to protect the civil rights of persons with all types and kinds of disabilities. Despite our affirmation, fewer people with disabilities attend church than able-bodied people. People with more severely disabling conditions are even less involved in the ministry of the church. And sadly, the church is a place where people with disabilities who do attend often experience stares, rejection, and bad theology. It said in here about a pastor having polio as a child, and she recalled the pain she experienced when she was not allowed to attend church camp because of fear and prejudice. She left the church for a good part of her adult life because of this rejection. This is what you call the attitudinal barrier. Churches won't be making these mistakes if they become aware of the needs and the issues related to disability access. People of faith should prayerfully study the scriptures and learn about the challenges that able-bodied people pose for people with disabilities. And a good place to begin improving awareness is to conduct an accessibility audit. This is a thorough survey of the congregation's facilities and attitudes will help identify the specific areas of concern the church needs to address as it reaches out to people with disabilities. As awareness grows, so will the church's heart for outreach. The opportunities for new and expanded ministries are many. Third, advocacy. What is advocacy? If I could say the word advocacy. It's about helping and assisting people. In the Bible, advocacy was demonstrated in Mark 2:2-5. And this is when, you recall, when 4 men brought a man who was paralyzed to Jesus by removing the tiles from the roof, and they brought him down to see Jesus. Our church can be like those 4 men and help our friends to Jesus. So advocacy happens anytime the church is active in the world, speaking for social justice for people who are oppressed. I conclude here with where do we begin with the church and people with disabilities, the awareness, the accessibility, and the advocacy. You begin with prayer. Prayer is essential. The book of James reminds us the prayer of the righteous is powerful and effective. It's James 5:16. You can enlarge this prayer group to form a committee that includes people who believe that God has called them to serve in this ministry. The committee should begin with an accessibility audit, accessibility of the church. This could take weeks and should be used to carefully analyze every aspect of the physical and attitudinal accessibility of the church. Then the committee should prayerfully determine the next steps. The ministry needs to be primarily people-based and not building renovation-driven. In the end, it's about loving each other. It's about loving one another and being there for one another, just as Jesus was and is. It says here in Mark 12, 30 and 31. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. And the second is this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Amen. There is no other commandment greater than these. Amen.
Amen.